First story tonight. God, I love this article. This one is really good. All right, so this is by Matt Taibbi. By the way, if you don't follow him on Substack, I recommend that you do. It's called TK News by Matt Taibbi. So this article is titled, Bush is Biden and Biden is Bush. Well, well, well. I feel like that moment from that Family Guy episode when Brian goes, well, well, well. Well, well, well. He says it like 3 different scenes. It's really funny. But this is worth talking about. So here we go. Bush is Biden and Biden is Bush. George W. Bush returns to the news with a tad too much honesty, lifting a veil on Washington's dirtiest open secret. The Biden Democrats have become the Bush Republicans. Oh, buddy, here we go. And there's W there, and there's Biden there. George W. Bush returned to the news last week. The man who once said, our enemies never stop thinking about new ways to harm our country and our people, and neither do we, coughed up a gem of accidental truth about Ukraine. In the midst of blasting Vladimir Putin for suppressing dissent, he said, and actually the link's here, so I'm just going to play this for you.
Thank you. In contrast, Russian elections are rigged. Political opponents are imprisoned or otherwise eliminated from participating in the electoral process. The result is an absence of checks and balances in Russia and the decision of one man to launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of Ukraine. Iraq, anyway.
So he accidentally said the quiet part out loud. Let's hear that again, and I'll get back to the article. One more time.
Participating in the electoral process. The result is an absence of checks and balances in Russia and the decision of one man to launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of Ukraine. Iraq, anyway. 75.
He blames it on his age, but he actually said the truth there. That was not supposed to come out. That was not supposed to come out. So I love that he shared that. Let me pull myself back here. All right, so here we go. Although Bush in recent years has been regularly tongue-bathed by Blue Party acolytes for speaking against Trump, with Katie Hill once going so far as to admit to tears as she pondered how much better we'd all feel if Bush were president today. Stephen Colbert even waxed nostalgic, remembering the time before his current apple polishing period when he was an actual satirist under Bush. I made so much fun of him, and he gave me so many reasons to do that. Propaganda demands Bush take a dive now. Not only did his recent honesty malfunction complicate messaging about the unique iniquity of Russian aggression, he's a living reminder of the uncomfortable truth that he and Joe Biden have essentially merged to become the same president. I really appreciate him saying that, because this is something that we've talked about over on RBN as well. When people talk about the Democratic Party, the Democrats being so much better, I want to remind everyone the Democratic Party is a center-right party. Some would even say completely right party. They're not much different from the Republicans. They're both pro-war. And you hear George Bush saying there, oh, the decisions of one man to wage an attack. That was him. That was him with the war in Iraq. Joe Biden isn't any different. Look, I just saw earlier today, and I'm going to try to talk about this sometime this week. I got a lot of people coming on this week. I just saw earlier today, Joe Biden is already saying that the United States government is going to intervene in Taiwan if things go awry with China. He's already saying it. This is why when it comes to foreign policy, when it comes to war, it really doesn't matter if we have a Democratic president or if we have a Republican president, because both parties are pro-war. Let's get back into the article. He goes on to say, Biden is just a less likable, more deranged version of W, a political potted plant behind which authoritarians rule by witch hunt and moral mania, with Joe floating on a somehow even fatter cloud of media protection than Bush enjoyed after September 11. Today's Biden is Bush, a helpless, terrified passenger dragged on a political journey beyond his comprehension, signing his name to whenever told to appalling policies, like a child emperor or King George in the Porphyria years. Let me say that again. I messed that up. Like a child emperor or King George in the Porphyria years. It's obvious, but no one will bring it up for the usual reason, i.e., because Trump. Let's talk about this for just a second. It is very clear that Joe Biden seems to be lost, whether it's a press conference, whether it's a one-on-one interview. He doesn't seem to be fully aware of what is going on around him. So much to the point that people, commentators have said, who's running the country? Charlemagne the God asked Kamala Harris this question. Who's the president? Joe Biden or Joe Manchin? Kamala responded with an attack toward Charlemagne, basically criticizing him of talking like a Republican, because she couldn't answer the question really. It's a wake-up call, I think, for the Democratic Party, because I don't think that they are used to the American people, especially people who vote Democrat, calling them out in masses the way that they are now. I also remember when George W. was president. A lot of people don't know this. I don't know if I ever told you, but I actually met W. He came to my college when I was an undergrad. He spoke, and I'm just going to be honest with you. He did not seem like the sharpest tool in the shed, even during that speech. You see, some of the same things that people are saying about Joe Biden right now, who's running the country, I remember people saying those same statements when W was president. Some of the same concerns that people felt like he was not competent enough to be running the country. Yes, Miguel, I did. Yes, Miguel, I did. You met W.Y. Yeah, he came to my college. But Matt Taibbi writing this article is a reminder for those of us who were around back during that time that you basically, with Biden, we basically got Bush 2.0. Let's go back in. The major difference is that while Bush was hammered as a simpleton by media smart Alex for 8 years, Biden's steep mental decline has gone uncovered in an undeclared press ceasefire. It's more than a superficial resemblance. The mainstream Democratic Party project has merged in every meaningful way with the materialistic, authoritarian, surveillance-heavy vision of Bush's neocon presidency. With woke fundamentalism replacing Bush's faith-based evangelism, and Dems most recently pushing their own souped-up version of the Patriot Act. You could see the seeds of the merger back when Biden was still a sentient being. In those Bush years, when Scranton Joe was the chief Democratic cheerleader for Bush's brutal Iraq invasion. Let's talk about something here for just a second. Let's remember how many people actually voted against the war in Iraq. I remember two. Someone correct me in the chat if I'm wrong. Bernie Sanders and Barbara Lee. I remember them telling us for months that we were doing the right thing, that we needed to intervene. I remember them telling us over and over and over again that there were weapons of mass destruction. Where are they? So it was a lie. And it's interesting to me how many people went to bat for W back then. Now, later on, when the economy started to decline, people were pretty mad at Bush. The same way some people are mad at Biden right now. There's a lot of similarity here. And it's interesting because even though now Americans know that it was a lie, they are so quick to believe any other conflict that we get involved in today. They don't want to question it. They don't want to do their own research, even though they lived through a lie. That's how strong the propaganda is in this country. Let's go back in. In his later, more overtly Bushian phase, Biden lied about his Iraq record repeatedly. But media outlets covering his presidential run told us not to put too much stock into his gaffes, which were nothing of the sort. They were intentional deceptions. Immediately that moment it started, I came out against the war at that moment. That is a lie, ladies and gentlemen. That is a lie. Biden told NPR this in September 2019, prompting a story about verbal slip-ups, which became the go-to euphemism. In a debate against Trump a year later, Biden was even more explicitly deceptive. From the moment shock and awe started, from that moment, I was opposed to the effort and I was outspoken as much as anyone at all in the Congress and the administration. Again, ladies and gentlemen, that is a lie. And every time this has happened, even before Joe Biden was president, even when he was still running, every time he had these slip-ups, the media would tell us that we need to forgive him. We need to be nicer to him. That's been going around a lot, by the way. We need to be nicer to these politicians. Why? Are they nice to us? He goes on to say, this was just a lie and not a particularly clever one. Biden told Fox months after the Iraq invasion that I do think it was a just war. He told reporters weeks after, we need more forces, and gave a speech at the Brookings Institution weeks later in which he said his yay vote for war was the right vote then, and it would be a correct vote today. Isn't that funny how people remember or people forget these things? As Ryan Grimm put it 2 years ago, Biden demonstrably supported the Iraq war before, during, and after the invasion. Unlike Bush, he never stopped lying about it. If you want a clue into the political logic that drove both presidencies, a place to start is The Right Man, a slobbering hagiography written by current Blue Party darling and Bush speechwriter David Frum at the outset of the Iraq catastrophe. Arthur Frum paints himself as a world-weary wordsmith whose reflexive media class cynicism was instantly exploded by exposure to Honest George artless rectitude. Every page of Frum's book is filled with hilarious caricatures of presidential myth-making, depicting Bush as a beatific cross of George Washington and Ben Stiller's Simple Jack character from Tropic Thunder. And here's the Simple Jack here's the Simple Jack trail. I can't play it on here because of copyright, but I know what he's referring to. And then I'm going to go to this portion down here. Bush was the perfect politician to accelerate the long-sought elite project of deconstructing American liberalism and constitutional principle and replacing them with an authoritarian technocracy that rules by moral emergency. Bush's special vulnerability was that he wasn't just an evangelical Christian, but a reformed alcoholic for whom rigidity and moral absolutism were desperate personal necessities. A George Bush who slipped and stopped seeing the world in black and white for even 5 seconds would likely wake up blowing coke in his own personal Hobbesian jungle in no time. He was easily convinced that unconquered world was fraught with unacceptable dangers because for him, it was. This absolutism got him into the White House. Bush lost by 19 points among women who work outside the home, while the voters who carried him were those most outraged by Clinton's misconduct. Among the 1/4 of voters who said the most important consideration in voting was honesty, 80% voted for Bush over Gore. Bush, in other words, lost the popular vote, and the remaining plurality that didn't see him as an illegitimate executive installed by the judiciary had elected him virtually without expectations. Republicans just wanted him not to be Clinton. Now, what does that remind you of? A lot of people that came out and voted for Joe Biden just wanted him not to be Trump. These are some of the similarities between George W. Bush and Joe Biden. And honestly, if Matt Taibbi didn't write this article, I don't know if I would have made the comparison. I just wasn't thinking about it. I don't really think about George W. honestly until recently when he made that slip up. Other than that, I was like, who? But they're similar. Let's go back in. Whoopsie. Okay, here we go. If this sounds similar, it's because it's more or less exactly how Biden got elected. 3 out of every 10 Biden voters said they were primarily voting against Donald Trump. Moreover, even though it was constantly reported that women won the election for Biden, Trump actually gained among women in 2020 versus 2016. Astonishing. Given the amount of negative coverage about his misogynistic attitudes, while Biden won because an even split among men in the 2016 race became an 11-point advantage for Team Blue in 2020. Biden, like Bush, was sent to Washington as an essentially mandateless president. I'm going to say this again. Biden, like Bush, was sent to Washington as an essentially mandateless president, elected in a spasm of moral reaction by people who voted for who he wasn't, not for who he was. I'm not going to read the entire article. Eric, can you put the link to the article in the chat so people can actually check out that full article themselves? The article goes on. But how many of you would have made these comparisons between W and Biden before honestly, like this article really like spoke to me. I try not to think about the Bush years because that was a tough time for me. That was a tough time going towards the end of his second term and going into Obama's 2008 term. That was a tough time for me, really financially. But this speaks volumes. They're not that different. And so for those of you who have just joined, the name of this article, I don't know why I can't scroll up. The name of this article is called Bush is Biden and Biden is Bush. And it's by Matt Taibbi. That article is on Substack. Definitely check it out.